First of all, it's wonderful to be here, and I really appreciated getting to know some of you last night and yesterday. I don't like to give a speech when I don't really know and feel who I'm speaking to. But I had to. I had to write a speech. It's analog, unfortunately, so caper. Um, but there would be two changes if I had known you better. First of all, I would have probably changed something in my text because I think you know it, but it's also nice to hear things again. And the other thing is, I would definitely have worn my blue jeans, which I would get much more comfortable in. Anyway, so as many people are asking me, I've been in Europe for 50 years. That's more than some people have done lives. But as a confident young white woman from a wealthy country, I found Europe a very welcoming place. And although I now have Belgian nationality, of course I wasn't born there. Now, it's said that we so called New Europeans are the ones who are most loyal to the idea of this unified, shared cultural space. And I'm not sure if that's true or not, but my feelings towards Belgium and towards Europe are mostly conditioned by the things I've learned since being here, but also the people who cared for me and the way they cared for me. But I'm not here to talk about me. I'm here to talk to and about and with you. And I want to say something which I feel is super important. You are all really, really important. Really important. Let's sit with that for a while, not in an egotistical sense, but in the sense of how influential you are going to be. You were, you are. You're all either planning or executing or dreaming or cleaning up after this massive project of organizing a European capital culture. People trust you. You're in a very responsible position. You might give a young artist the first ever substantial support for doing something before they start to blossom in their career. You might be giving an older artist the possibility to do something they've always dreamt of, but never had the means to do. You might give someone in your community a day when they're going to feel needed, less isolated, perhaps lighter in the problems that they're facing. And you might just give someone, despite all the things that we do, we believe in, we have to say, all of these other spin-off benefits of participating in the arts and culture, you still might give someone the intrinsic value of culture just by being with a work of art, seeing a work of art, sitting with a work of art, asking oneself why the artist made those choices, why they didn't make other choices. But you're not just programming to affect individuals. Of course, you're programming to affect communities, cities, even regions. And it gives the possibility for those places and the individuals in them to come up against one another, to come up against one another in terms of their values, for their values to mix, to mingle, to sometimes challenge. You're asking your communities to cross borders. Now, there's a lot of rhetorical cultural policy language around about European values. Stating democracy, equality, the rule of law, respect the human rights, minority rights. The member states share a society in which pluralism, non-discrimination, tolerance, justice, solidarity, and equality between women and men prevail. This is Article 2 of the Treaty on European Union. I might say that these are not only European values. We might say that Europe also has taken on these values, which might be shared by other places. However, my point is, what on earth are you going to program to respect and reflect all of that? And the ECoCs, as we have heard, are supposed to leave legacies Will your legacy be only in the built environment, no offense to bridges? Or will it be in people's mindsets? Will people start to have a tangible, a concrete respect and openness towards others in their day-to-day lives? Will your community understand better why this famous phrase we use a lot, artistic freedom, freedom of artistic expression, will they start to understand why that's important and why this is the so-called fresh air of society? And will your audiences develop enough curiosity, and I would even say courage, to be able to engage with challenging ideas instead of turning their backs on them and walking by? And that's a big one. But your influence, again, it's not a small thing. And perhaps it's not only the what of programming, but it's more about the how. This brings to mind qualities of trust, responsibility, and care. The French philosopher Paul Ricoeur wrote, "Another, by relying on me, renders me accountable for my acts." Inversely, as soon as the other relies on or trusts in me, what he or she expects is precisely that I shall keep my word and behave as the author of my own acts. When we influence, when we are trusted, we are accountable to the communities who trust us, the funders who subsidize us, the artists, that's not who we commission, and that's also important because sometimes things go wrong and there is a breach of trust. And importantly, the colleagues who work alongside us. We are accountable for those human values. And this brings up the third quality of care. 2004, I completed a PhD, one of the oldest students in the world. It focused on issues around the rights and citizenship of artists who had been persecuted in their home countries and relocated for safety to countries in the EU. I also looked at policies and practices in the arts and culture sector that either supported and warmly welcomed those artists or very patently did not. And I dived deep into the ethics of care. Now, I had heard care, it's kind of trendy. And, it's been around where I think Elefsina has a manifesto on it, but I had looked into it. It's a whole branch of philosophy. It's a branch of ethics, but it's also a practice. And we perform care when we concretely care about the people that we are influencing. In her book, 2024 book, Imperfect Solidarities, Aruna D'Souza wrote unromantically about care. Care before love. Care before empathy. This is the politics I aspire to. A solidarity that comes very directly from a commitment to care, because that is the most basic human obligation we have to one another. If empathy or love develop along the way, that's a gift, but not a requirement. So care is obligation from one human being as a human being to another that produces solidarity. I'm wearing this, is it a fashion statement and a cool, is it care to wear? No, I'm wearing it because for well over 20 years, I've been working with colleagues in different parts of the world, including Palestine, Lebanon, Syria. It's the least thing that I can do. The international arts community is, by default, an international community. Even if we're only working locally, even if we're only working nationally, the artists and the arts have been forever colored by international experiences. If we can't be solidarity in the arts community, then I really have no hope. And the arts community is not always in solidarity with one another. I've worked in the arts sector all my life. I've been very critical about certain behaviors in my sector, my dear sector. When I saw that the rhetorical cultural policy language was not matched in actual practice, and I use the concept putting ethics into action. Next slide. Now, if you're not familiar with it, and if you're not tired of it already from its trendiness, uh, normally there are more or less 5 key values. Attentiveness, looking around, being aware of what's happening outside of your circle. Responsibility, feeling that you have a role to play in these situations. Competence, having or getting the competence which is needed in that situation. Responsiveness, this is important, ensuring that the person or the people that you're working with and caring for are well aware of the action and approve of the action that is being taken and ideally are co-creating it. And finally, trust and solidarity, which is standing up on an equal basis with one another to support one another. And this ethics of care as a human obligation, collective solidarity, is pertinent to the ECoCs. In the last 2 years, there's been a focus on care, as I said, and some very good fair practices have been instituted by arts organizations. But we're all still seeing artists, curators, staff members, as well as managers, overworked and overpaid. I won't ask you to raise your hands. To use a meme, artists gonna art and cultural operators gonna operate because they so deeply care about the work that they're doing, and it's so easy to exploit them. In fact, for years, I could not bear and quite frightened of them. I saw too many of my dear friends burnt out, even hospitalized, fired, kicked out, and even sued. All those friends suffered because they cared so very much about their arts and cultural work that they were organizing. But who cared for them? One way of practicing care and solidarity is in the arts and culture networks. You are one. A bit of history. I was not the first person on the scene when the early cultural networks were being created, but I was not far behind. IETN, the large network for contemporary performing arts, was founded in 1989. I joined as a member in 1992 and then as Secretary General in 1994. But those early days were really heady. They were marked with this passionate solidarity. In fact, my first official act was to stay up all night and co-write a declaration that all the IETM members would sign to support the Romanian culture sector, whose new government was then threatening their independence. Cultural operators then were really excited about meeting their counterparts because before that, in the old days, a lot of connections were made from ministries introducing people. So this was really one-to-one connection. And we wanted to demonstrate that culture and the arts were as important to the EU as coal and steel. This excitement was not limited to the then EU members. In fact, one of the 5 founders of IETM came from the Balkans. So our foot is there. And we soon expanded to collaborating with Central Southeastern European colleagues and the colleagues south of the Mediterranean and beyond. It's important to note that back then it wasn't so much about money. There weren't the collaborative grants that are available now. There was no or hardly any cultural policy to speak of. And the European Commission was actually against us. One member whose name I won't repeat used to mock us by saying networking is not working, ha ha ha. We hated it. The Danish and German National Arts Institutes called us, and I quote, unwelcome intermediaries between artists and arts organizations. We fought really hard for recognition, and I think history has proved us right. But in our foundation years, we didn't immediately pitch for financial investment. The idea was that we were with like-minded colleagues. My friend and former colleague, Tony Gonzalez, has recently defined the network thing as a place of connection and and intellectual friction. And I really like that idea of the intellectual friction. But it was on the basis of trust that we felt we could then create artistic collaborations. We were crossing borders to exchange ideas. We wanted to meet people that we didn't even know yet, to get to know them, who were working in conditions that we had no idea about. But we all wanted to learn because it would be better for us in our jobs. This quotation from Ali Smith's novel, Spring, describes it well. She uses as the narrator a young girl who we later realize in the book eventually, whose mother has been taken away by immigration police. What if, the girl says, instead of saying this border divides places, we said this border holds together two really interesting different places? What if we declared border crossings places where, listen, when you crossed them, you yourself became doubly possible? This quotation always makes me shiver because it speaks of how we enlarge ourselves. We become bigger, our minds become deeper by crossing borders, whether territorial, age, class, race, religion, or other. In political science, cultural networks could be seen as epistemic communities. Epistemic communities are communities of people who have a deep recognized expertise and competence about a certain subject. Therefore, the quotation goes, they have an authoritative claim to policy relevant knowledge. And what's most interesting about them, I find, is that they don't work for material gain, but for the promotion of their policy project. I don't believe it's possible to be a network, arts or otherwise, without having a political weight. A group of professionals with knowledge, who share that knowledge, who discuss it, and thus develop it, and then bring it back to the existing community. This is a political act. Culture network is a network, but you are also all networkers. You are what in the lingo is called nodes. You're taking one inspiration and approach and observation to another setting. You're giving it. You're taking back from that setting different ideas, like bees were pollinating. So I highly recommend, if you're not already, to join yet another of the European cultural networks. There must be hundreds by now. And for thematic reasons, to meet people, to have mutual inspiration, to give them, to get from them, to have new ideas, and of course, to develop partnerships. Whether it's on the move and it's focused on arts mobility, Trans-Europol working with grassroots arts organizations, IETM for the performing arts, Trans Artists for artist residencies, or Culture Action Europe, which is the overall network to influence policy in Europe. And just to end, I recently read an article critiquing the fact that everything, including and maybe the arts, has been instrumentalized. It's called the 6-minute hug. And he says that even hugging has become instrumentalized because you don't hug someone for 6 minutes, which apparently gives you a change in your body. Not for the other person, but you do it for yourself because it helps you to become more healthier. So it's true, I think that the arts sector, let's say we've let ourselves be manipulated into using instrumentalizing arguments, especially economic ones. It's regrettable, but, it's almost impossible to do anything without money. But even the most illuminated and consultative public policy is top-down by nature. It's written by policymakers who represent power, who work for power. Thus, automatically or inadvertently, it manipulates those for whom the policy is written. And yet there's a paradox here, because democracy is bottom up. The strongest impetus to change comes from people, from communities. The ECoCs are rooted in communities. So the best thing that you, influential ECoCs, can do is to listen and amplify the ideas and the approaches of your communities, multi-local and local, and the artists up to the policy level. This is super critical today because democracy is in decline in so many places, including in your countries. And we see the results of it. So we all have to work at this, no matter where we are, what we do, in our spheres of influence, whether they're large or small. Well, what's at stake? I mean, I have to say that I'm the biggest doom scroller of all. I wake up in the morning with my phone and I read the news at 6 until 7, and I'm reading the news until I go to bed at night. I don't think we're in a good place. But there's something, despite everything, that I still believe in. And that's a Europe, maybe a world, but at least a Europe, of borders that are there to cross, of care, and of freedom, of respectful exchange. Actually, a Europe of justice. Well, maybe all those things that were in the first slide, but it will take work, care, and solidarity on all of our parts.